This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, Heather Ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe on this date. And on this date, May 19th, 1974, the Philadelphia Flyers took on the Boston Bruins in Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Finals. Why is this so important? Well, the Flyers won the series in the big Game 6 to get their first Stanley Cup as a franchise. In fact, the Flyers were the first non-original Six Cup champion since the Montreal Maroons in 1935. So let's deal with some context here about the 1973-74 season. There were 16 teams in two divisions, the East and the West divisions. Boston, Montreal, New York, and Toronto. 4 of the original 6 easily made it through the East. In the West, there was the Flyers, Blackhawks, Kings, and the Atlanta Flames to be in the Western playoffs. So the Boston Bruins in the quarterfinals, they were the best team in the East. They would take on the number 4 seed Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Leafs gave them nothing, as the Leafs easily got swept by Boston. Philadelphia won the West and would take on the Atlanta Flames, who were only in their second season after expansion. But the Flyers crushed the Flames easily and force rate themselves. In fact, Game 4 was scored by was an overtime winner scored by an unlikely source, Dave the Hammer Schultz. Anyway, in the semifinals, with the crossover, Boston would take on Chicago. Chicago actually was up 2-1 on Boston, but Boston would sweep them the rest of the way. The Hawks were trying to get to their second straight Stanley Cup Finals appearance. In the other semifinal, the Flyers would take on the New York Rangers, the pesky New York Rangers. This series would be remembered for one key thing. All 7 games were won by the home team, which meant that the Flyers, with the extra home game, won the series. And unfortunately, Dave Schultz beat the tar out of Dale Rolfe so badly, the Rangers players allegedly chickened out and couldn't try to help him out. Now, unfortunately, that is false because in 1974, there was a rule that a third man into a fight, even if it's to protect his own player, could have been thrown out of the game. And the Rangers didn't want anybody, even like a role player, thrown out. Still would have done something. So anyway, the Flyers had a tough task, and Boston did too. So anyway, the Flyers were terrible. Especially in Boston. The Flyers were 0-17-2 in Boston, so that's what happens. And Boston had home ice advantage because, they had more points. They were in heavy favorites. I mean, why wouldn't they? I mean, they won 2 Stanley Cups in the 1970s already, 1970 and 72, and it's the original 16. It was a flair for the dramatic. In Game 1, Boston won on home turf 3-2 on a whim. Game 2 saw Bobby Clark shock a lot of people by scoring a key overtime winner. The Flyers won Game 2 in Boston, making it 1-1, taking home ice advantage from Boston. In Game 3, and 4, Philadelphia, on home turf, won both games. So Boston was in deep trouble. They needed to win 3 straight. In Game 5, they won on home turf 5-1. Unfortunately for Boston, their time had come. In front of a national TV audience on NBC and a lot of fans in Philadelphia, the Flyers won the game 1-0 to win the Stanley Cup. Bernie Perrant was an icon and deservedly so of the Conn Smythe Trophy for MVP of the playoffs. Now, a lot of people think that Andre Moose Dupont, who was this awkward defenseman, scored the cup-winning goal. Unfortunately, that is actually false, as many sources point out that Dupont's slap shot from the point was deflected by Flyers winger Rick McLeish. So Rick McLeish technically was the hero and all that. The Flyers were celebrating like there was no tomorrow. The Stanley Cup win triggered the biggest celebration in Flyers in Philadelphia sports history. Coming from a city whose baseball team, the Phillies, didn't win a world title until 1980. They were the last of the original 16 franchises from the 1901 Major Leagues to win a title. That's hard to believe. The Sixers wouldn't win a title till 1983. Well, they won in 1967, but yeah. And the Eagles, well, they're terrible. Anyway, this was the first time that Philadelphia had a massive parade since Japan's surrender, August 1945, in the war. 2 million people lined Broad Street for a ticker tape parade. Mike Richter, who won a cup himself with the 94 Rangers, actually was at that parade too. So the Flyers won the Stanley Cup, and finally the original six era would have to learn that there'd be some new kids in town. The Flyers did use their goon tactics and all that. Mostly why they got past the Rangers in Game 7. But as is, the Flyers got the Stanley Cup. In 1975, though, the Flyers would go back to the Stanley Cup final and win in 6 games over the Buffalo Sabres, winning in Buffalo. Boston would take a little bit of time to recover, but they recovered quite nicely by the end of the 70s. So that's what happened. So the funny thing about the Flyers is after 1975, they went to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1976, 1980, 1985, 1987, 1997, and 2010, and have not won the Stanley Cup. So they've been to 6 straight Stanley Cup Finals without winning it. Anyhow, the Flyers. Here's your roster: at center, Bill Clement. Yes, that Bill Clement from ESPN fame. Terry Crisp. Yes, the 1989 Flames head coach. Bobby Clark. Yes, that one. Rick McLeish. Yes, that one. Oris Kindrachek. Yes, that one. On wings, Bill Barber. Kitchener. Dave Schultz. Bob Moose Kelly. Don Big Bird Selesky. Gary Dornhofer. Yes, that Gary Dornhofer. Simone Nollet. Ross Lonsberry. Bill Cowboy Flett. And Bruce Cowick. At defense, Ed Van Imp, Tom Bladen, Barry Ashby, Andre Moose DuPont, Joe Watson, and his brother Jimmy Watson. And in net, Bertie Perrant and Bobby Taylor. Al McAdam actually played in the playoffs for the Flyers for 1 game, but he got a Stanley Cup ring, but not on the Stanley. He did not get his name engraved on the Stanley Cup. Bruce Cowick actually was not on the Flyers regular season roster, but because at that time you can get 1 game in the Stanley Cup playoffs, you could get the Stanley Cup. So he was eligible to have a ring and get on the Stanley Cup. So yeah. So that just ruins the old school original 6 era. However, Montreal would get back on track, get the original 6s in everyone's good graces. But that's the way it goes. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.